We're in new territory this week, dummies. This will be my first dummies guide covering one of those fabled foreign films that clever people like to brag about watching. I first broadened my horizons to include international features during the pandemic when there was nothing to do but watch movies. And Breathless was one of the first films that got me interested in venturing beyond my native tongue and seeing what other nations had to say with the art of cinema. Breathless was the debut film of Jean-Luc Godard. Godard had spent his early career working as a critic, but he and his contemporaries lamented the so-called tradition of quality in mainstream French cinema. Stale literary adaptations with melodramatic narratives and a focus on technical proficiency over genuine artistry. So they put down the pen, picked up a camera, and made movies of their own. Godard and his cronies aped the conventions of Hollywood filmmaking, developed experimental new shooting and editing techniques, and ended up pioneering the French New Wave and radically reshaping the face of world cinema. The 400 Blows and Hiroshima Mon Amour had been released a year earlier, but the movement began proper with the arrival of Breathless. Until Breathless came along, narrative filmmaking had very rote traditions that directors rigidly adhered to. Godard ignored those formal traditions, broke all the rules, and liberated the entire medium. He shot close-ups of the back of his actors' heads. He let his dialogue scenes breathe and go off script.
J'en ai plus envie de jouer aujourd'hui.
In her review of Godard's later film Band Apart, Pauline Kael wrote, "It's as if a French poet took an ordinary, banal American crime novel and told it to us in terms of the romance and beauty he read between the lines." That's a perfect encapsulation of the way Godard revolutionized the crime movie, and it started with Breathless. Breathless is a loving homage to American crime films, but it's also a meta deconstruction of the American crime film. The lead character, Michel, is obsessed with Hollywood noirs and models himself after their anti-heroes, particularly Humphrey Bogart, whose on-screen persona he worships like a god. He wears a fedora and chain-smokes cigarettes to emulate the American gangsters he's seen on the big screen. Godard would come back to this idea in Band Apart, where the two main characters have pretend shootouts to mimic their favorite films, but find themselves way out of their depth when they try to commit an actual crime. The key distinction is that these guys want to be like their favorite movie stars, but they're nothing like them. Michel wants to be a Bogart character like Star-Lord wants to be Han Solo.
Star-Lord.
Who?
Well, Star-Lord, man. Legendary outlaw.
In both cases, they're just a try-hard imitation. Michel can cosplay all he wants, but he doesn't have the effortless cool to truly embody his cinematic idol. This is made clear in the opening minutes when Michel is pulled over by the police for driving a stolen car and impulsively guns down the officer coming over to question him. Godard's choppy, disorienting editing robs Michel of the triumph of a Bogart movie scene. He cuts straight from the killing to Michel running away like a coward. The message is clear. Murder isn't as badass as it looks in the movies. Michel wants to have the cool detachment of the anti-heroes he idolizes, but he can't help experiencing the human emotions that Bogart's fictional characters aren't burdened by. He instantly regrets murdering a cop over a trivial traffic stop, and he's scared when he sees his face in the paper as a wanted man. Michel flees to Paris and stays with his on and off lover Patricia, an American student and aspiring journalist. Their relationship forms the dramatic backbone of the film. It mixes a love story into the crime story. As Michel tries to evade the cops looking for him and scrape together some cash so he can escape to Italy, Patricia is conflicted about his criminal activities and considers turning him in. Godard wears his cinematic influences on his sleeve and constantly draws attention to the fact that this is a crime movie set in a world where the characters are familiar with the tropes and conventions of crime movies. The same way the characters in Scream are familiar with slashers, and the characters in Hot Fuzz are familiar with buddy cop action movies. When Patricia flees from a detective trying to get her to turn in Michel, she ends up in a cinema playing a scene from Otto Preminger's Whirlpool in which the police are manipulating a woman's guilty conscience. As Patricia hides from the cops, we hear movie dialogue imploring a woman not to cover up a murder. It's postmodernism 30 years before postmodernism was a thing.
It's Pomo. Postmodern. Yeah, alright, weird for the sake of weird. Oh.
Godard shot the film chronologically, except the opening, which he shot near the end of production, and wrote the script as he went along, working from an initial story treatment by Francois Truffaut. To save time and money, Godard and his crew used a lot of guerrilla filmmaking techniques. They filmed the whole movie on handheld cameras, so all the shots are shaky and spontaneous. They're not smooth at all. But those imperfections are part of the charm. Godard used almost no artificial light, and he even used a wheelchair as a dolly to avoid the cost and effort of renting a dolly and laying down a track.
Oh. No, I can get up myself. Oh! Ah! There we go. Let me get in the dolly.
No thank you, I don't need your help.
All this stuff makes the film feel alive. Rather than shutting down an entire block of Paris and filling the streets with extras to create an artificial facsimile of Parisian life, they just shot it in the midst of the everyday grind and captured the authentic atmosphere of the city. For some of the street shots, cinematographer Raoul Godard hid in a postal cart with a hole cut out for the lens. Film noirs typically had the harsh reality of urban decay stinking up the backdrop, but Breathless captures the hustle and bustle on the streets of Paris with a real sense of romance and vibrancy. Godard pioneered one of my personal favourite filmmaking techniques when he made Breathless. When he was editing the film and found himself with long takes that were fattening up the runtime, Godard decided to just chop them up and skip through all the best parts, and the jump cut was born. I actually used a lot of jump cuts in my first student film, but that one wasn't quite as groundbreaking or influential as Breathless. Cinema is a strange kind of time travel. A filmmaker can take audiences on a journey that lasts years and years in the space of a couple of hours. It's all in how they manipulate time and pace out their story. And jump cuts are a zippy, uniquely cinematic way to show the passage of time in a drawn-out sequence like a long drive or a verbose interview answer. Andrew Sarris interpreted the jump cuts to represent the meaninglessness of the time interval between moral decisions. I think that's overthinking it. The jump cuts merely give the film a refreshing vitality. Cut out all the boring parts and just leave in the interesting parts. It's the cinematic equivalent of beat poetry. Breathless has all the stylistic hallmarks of a classic American noir. It makes interesting use of shadows and silhouettes, which go hand in hand with the grainy, monochromatic aesthetic of black and white film. Martial Solal's score uses all the same instruments as a typical Hollywood noir score, but brings a sense of whimsy and spontaneity to the music. His jazzy, free-flowing melodies suit the snappy, unwieldy rhythm of the movie and create a kind of audio-visual poetry. The semi-improvised dialogue gives the whole movie a breezy, naturalistic feel to juxtapose against the genre thrills. We're watching a crime movie about the murder of a motorcycle cop and the manhunt for the culprit, but we spend a lot of time just hanging out with these two characters. The plot doesn't really matter. The movie dips in and out of even having a plot. You just go along for the ride and soak up Godard's brazen disregard for the traditions of film language.
Get this thing out of my sight!
Well, wait a second. How are you going to play by the rules if you don't have the rule book? Oh.
Throughout the film, Michel and Patricia engage in long dialogue scenes about mundane minutiae, like which cities have the prettiest women. These scenes exemplify Cale's between-the-lines comment. Godard favors character and subtext over plot and action, and those pointless conversations pave the way for more substantial conversations. That discussion about the prettiest cities in the world leads to Michel and Patricia discussing their feelings for one another. The way this movie tells its story isn't about building towards something, it's about savoring the moment. There's so much passion and intimacy in the close-ups of Michel and Patricia looking into each other's eyes and kissing, especially in the iconic hotel room sequence. It's rare that the romance in crime films is actually romantic, and it goes a long way. But as the film goes on, Michel exhibits the ugly side of love. Jealousy, possessiveness, neediness, obsession, unhealthy attachment. Michel and Patricia's relationship has been analysed through Nietzsche's concept of active versus passive nihilism. Michel and Patricia both bond over their shared nihilistic worldview, but Michel is an active nihilist. He doesn't care about the bigger picture, but he takes action in the present, like killing a cop and falling in love. While Patricia is a passive nihilist. She has a surprising coldness. She's uncomfortable with emotional expression. Patricia turns Michel over to the cops, leading to his death, and she doesn't seem to have any kind of emotional response. Oliver Stone compared Patricia to Nietzsche's last man. This is the inversion of the Übermensch, a person who's fed up with life, doesn't take any risks, and seeks nothing outside the sweet, blissful ignorance of their comfort zone. That's actually a pretty spot-on description of me, but I don't have Gene Seberg's charm or beauty to offset my boringness. Like many cautionary crime films, from Unflicked to Mean Streets, Breathless has an abrupt ending that tells us there's only one way a life of crime will end, in a body bag. After Patricia sells Michel out to the cops, he's gunned down in the street. Michel, running around with a bullet in his back, has an eerie, dance-like rhythm to it. As he lies dying in the street and Patricia stands over him, he mumbles an insult at her. She asks one of the cops what he said, the cop relays the insult to her, and she looks directly at the camera, exhibiting almost no emotion but mimicking Michel's lip-touching tic, and asks what it means. Now, exactly what that insult is often gets lost in translation. Apparently, that final dialogue is beautifully ambiguous in the original French.
C'est vraiment dégueulasse.
But it doesn't translate well to English. The closest direct translation is disgusting, but it can also be a synonym of bitch or heel, and it can imply a feeling of nausea. On the Fox Lorber DVD, he calls her a scumbag. On the Criterion version, he tells her she makes him want to puke. On my Blu-ray copy, he calls her a louse, which is the same thing she called him when he first showed up at her apartment asking for money. So it doesn't make sense that she doesn't know what it means. You probably have to become fluent in French for this final dialogue to hit right, but who has the time? Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you liked the video. Remember to like and subscribe and click on the little bell. And also seize the day and call your mom and be kind to yourself.